All the Mods 9, a huge mod pack with over 400 mods to it, one of the most popular mod packs out there, with crazy tech mods, wild structure mods, and a goal of obtaining creative mode items in survival Minecraft. But what if there is just no world? Welcome to All the Mods 9 to the Sky, a Skyblock version of this popular mod pack. This is the third episode of my 100-day series of this pack. If you are just now tuning in, make sure to watch the other two. Link in the description, of course. I am Bedrock Burger, your local ethical bee squisher. Subscribe, do it. In this leg of the journey, big projects happen that take a lot of time, so some days will be shorter than the last two episodes, as the projects took whole days or even multiple days. It's kind of crazy. But with this episode, I do have a good amount of goals like I always do. The first is a massive power generation source. If I can make 10 million FE per tick, I'll be happy. The second is to finish Blood Magic, which I started last episode and just kinda left it. Thirdly, take my Applied Energistics 2 system wireless. And finally, my fourth goal is to reach Alfheim and craft the fabled Mjolnir hammer from Botania. Will I accomplish all these goals? Will this be an episode of Hindsight 2020? Find out as I survive 100 more days in All the Mods 9 to the Sky. Subscribe. With day 200, I was excited to return to the world and get back to work. The mod pack had updated, so I turned in a bunch of quests for EXP and such. The quest seemed a bit bugged though, as there's a quest for the teleport pad, but there's no mining dimension in this pack. Weird. Anyways, I did a thing I noted to do between recording days 100 to 200 and this set of 100 days. Make seeds for Awakened Draconium. I wouldn't touch Draconic Evolution in this 100 days, but when I get back to it, I'll definitely have more than enough for it, as the base recipe to craft it is really annoying to do. I then slept into day 201. With this day, I set down a schematic cannon with a new build, a much larger house for bees. The one I made last time was way too small, as there's a lot of bees in the Productive Bees mod, so I needed a larger one for all the bees I'd eventually get. Future burger problem. With the cannon set and schematic place, I got to work on most of the materials. At this point in the run, I had assumed that I had a ton of glowstone, as why wouldn't I? But as it turns out, I had extremely little, and one of the lights I used on the larger bee house used glowstone. So as day 202 began, I made glowstone seeds through mystical agriculture and added them to my phytogenic insulator network. I then took the rest of the night to just build out my dirt island. Since it was night, a bunch of mobs were spawning in the areas that I hadn't lit yet. An opportunity presented itself, so I crafted an aerial pearl from the power mod and slurped up a zombie with it, making a player aerial pearl. This player aerial pearl could go into a player transmitter to wirelessly transfer power to any equipment on my person that required power. I wouldn't do that yet though, as I had some other plans to do first. In day 203, I needed uranium for my reactor that I wanted to create, so I set up a small igneous extruder generator to make deep slate. Deep slate could be crushed and then sieved to have a chance to make uranium chunks, which could be crafted into the ore, then into the bars. It would take an oddly infuriating amount of time to get the uranium, so while waiting, I made the player transmitter I talked about earlier. I took it all the way up to the nitro tier for power, which could store up to 2 billion FE and transmit more than enough power for my jetpack and wireless AE2 access. A bit overkill, but we here at Bedrock Burger love overkill. You'll see eventually. With day 204, my small deep slate sieve thing actually made enough uranium to where I could crush the ore into 4 dust, smelting it and getting 4 bars, which is the magical number to turn them into seeds with mystical agriculture. I then tried out a new method of hooking the seeds up to a phytogenic insulator, or phyto as I will call them for the rest of the video. I did make this design originally in a run of All the Mods 9 base that I scrapped and restarted. Essentially, it was a 1x2 drawer on the output side with input-output for where the drawer is, then have the output, aka the drawer, go into a tier 3 crafter from RF Tools to craft the essence created into bars, which then went into their own drawer as a buffer, then into the reactor that I would begin working on. To make the reactor from the Big Reactors mod, I'd need a few things. Reactor casings being the most important, as that's what the reactor itself is made of. To make them, I'd need uranium, iron, and graphite, which was made from smelting coal. There are graphite seeds, and I literally looked right at them in JEI, but I simply forgot about them. It happens. I made enough reactor casings for the quest, then in day 205 I made the rest required for a reactor. The power tap, access port, 2 of them, and the terminal. I made the basic 3x3x3 reactor for the quest, then turned it on. Don't forget to ensure that one of the access ports is set to export waste or it'll explode. The basic 3x3 reactor made a measly 2.6k FE per tick, which was far from enough. I wanted millions. Millions! I went up to a 5x5x5 to test it out, and that one made 21k FE per tick with the reactor not even full, which was better, but not enough. In day 206, I started to work on what I would call Big Bertha, a gigantic reactor to make my millions of power I would want. Not need, but want. In my hubris, I wanted to be a 49x49x49 reactor, so I got to work, lining it all out and setting up a place for the reactor access port to input uranium. And now to explain how this works using MS Paint. Essentially, the reactor eats uranium to make power, storing it in nuclear rods and burning it up, creating waste and power. So I needed to set up a contraption to make enough uranium to beat the consumption rate of the reactor. The more rods, the higher the consumption. I could use different blocks of materials to help the reactor out, making it more efficient. They're called moderators. I chose diamond because it was the best material that I had a ton of. The best in the pack is unobtainium, but there's no way I had enough for that right now. I did hear somewhere that the best way to make one of these reactors is by checkerboarding the fuel rods and the moderators. The reactor produced waste, so I set up a spot to output waste. One thing I did make a mistake of when building this reactor is that I accidentally had some edges outside of chunks that I could force load, and since I don't have cheats on for this world, I can't increase the amount of chunks I'm allowed to force load. So every time I move dimensions, or even move to the other side of my island, the reactor would partially unload, shutting it down in the process, which got pretty annoying, especially later on. FTB chunks, please increase the default amount. 25 is nowhere near enough. I didn't realize the issue of unloading until after I finished recording and started outlining, which was a bit obnoxious. I will actually have to shrink my reactor for the next 100 days. Now, with the simple explanation done and my frustrating problem explained, it was time to resume the grind. With day 207, I started to work on the phytos I would use to make all the uranium for the reactor. I thought at first that 10 would be enough, and I was definitely wrong, but I built up 49 blocks with the reactor casings, then started to fill out all the walls. I made a pattern for my Applied Energistics 2 system for all the reactor parts I would need to make it easier. Just hit a button and bam, 5,000 reactor glass. To help out with the auto crafting, I made 2 towers of extended pattern providers and extended molecular assemblers. It made auto crafting go a lot faster, but not as fast as I could make it. I would need more coprocessors for that, but at the time I wasn't aware that I could add more coprocessors to each of these towers. I finished these towers on day 208 using 256k crafting storages on them to make sure it sends a ton of materials to autocraft into what I requested. To round out that day, I made an extended ME drive which could hook up 20 slots of drives. In the last 100 days video, I did mention that I wasn't aware that I could use multiple drives on one ME network, so I aimed to fix that here. With day 209, not much to say here. I made a pattern for thermo series flux linkage amplifiers for my phytos to speed them up, then returned to Big Bertha. See what I mean about projects taking multiple days? Yeah, this one took quite some time. From days 210 through 213, it was pretty much the same. Work on Big Bertha, add more phytos, speed up the phytos, yell at politicians, add pattern providers to things, and so on. In day 213, I did finish the glass side of Big Bertha so that she could show her stuff to everyone. I also tried to hook up a smithing table to a pattern provider so I could auto-craft soul-infused flux linkage amplifiers, but it just didn't work. Not really sure why. Does anyone know how to auto-craft with a smithing table at AE2? Please leave a comment below. In day 214, I made a good amount of soul-infused flux linkage amplifiers. The thing about flux linkage amplifiers is that all of the upgrades after the base FLA, which is what I'm going to refer to from here on out, they all have the same increase to the power of the machine, but higher tiers use less power. For example, a base FLA increases the power of the machine by 100%, but also increases the FE drain per tick by 1.1 times. A soul infused is 110% power to the machine, but 1 times FE drain. An abyssal, which is the highest tier of FLA, keeps the same 110% power, but makes the FE drain to 0.6 times usage, so it makes it use less FE to do its operations. I also made sure to upgrade to hardened integral components, which took whatever the combined total of the FLAs did to the machine and multiplied it. A hardened was 3 times on thermal series machines. With these machines, it's most efficient to have 3 FLAs and 1 integral component. In this pack, unlike the base Mods 9, these integral components could go all the way up to 12 times, which I would get to later in the video. After making a bunch of FLAs, I resumed work on Big Bertha, adding drawers for uranium input and waste output, gold upgrades with void upgrades to delete anything that went over the amount they held of 134 million of one item per drawer. A tip I got from the comments in my last 100 days videos was to use more drawers, so I'm starting to do that here. This reactor would produce a very large amount of waste, and I didn't want it to go into my ME network, so drawers it is. In day 215, I just kept at it, making more diamond blocks and rods. To make it faster to autocraft the rods, I added 2 more towers of assemblers and pattern providers to my ME system. It took up a good amount of room, so my bottom floor of my Benelith was a bit cramped. With day 216, I continued my work to speed stuff up, crafting extended inscribers. They had 4 separate slots to inscribe stuff onto processors, so it was 4 times faster, I guess. That's how math works, right? Day 217 had me doing more work around my island, requesting a whopping 105 soul-infused FLAs, which in reality was just 105 of each component, as the smithing table provider still didn't work. It was slow, as my pulverizers from Thermal Series were slow to pulverize the soul sand. While that was going on, I made patterns for power batteries, then requested just 1 to shove into my ender cells. Each nitro battery held 2 billion power, so when I shift-click into an ender cell, it put that ender cell's capacity up to 2.1 billion. Nice buffer in case my power drain is higher than what I produce. With day 218, I had an idea. Instead of using wands or manually placing the diamond blocks and nuclear rods, what if I had a cannon do it for me? I was up to about 4 layers with the rods and blocks at this point, so I could shortcut some time by using the cannon. The first schematic I made required 4,000 of each. The diamond blocks are easy, as I still had a ton stocked up. The rods took quite a lot of time though, extending into day 219. While the rods were auto-crafting, I decided to go for unobtainium, making a template out of vibranium template and 8 unobtainium bars. I upgraded my armor all the way up, then used an extra template from the quest to upgrade my sword. It did a lot of damage and had a lot of defense. Not enough to protect me from the Chaos Guardian insta-kills, but it was still quite a lot. In day 220, I finally had enough glowstone to finish crafting the materials for the new bee house. It was pretty sizable, so when I activated the schematic cannon to fire it out, I decided not to record a montage as that would take way too long when I had a lot to do. While it printed, I deconstructed the old house since it wasn't really needed anymore. The space would be used later, don't worry. The cannon took quite a while to print, all the way into day 221. I did take that day to expand out my island to accompany it. I also did autocraft 2 more 256K disk drives for my storage just in case. The bee house finished pretty late into the day, but it was nice that it was done. I made sure to also add grass to the inside so that way it could grow all over the dirt I used. In day 222, I remembered that my Phyto factory didn't have windows, so I made sure to finish that up. It took some time, but by the end of the day I finished out the 4 layers of the reactor that I made a schematic of. It did take that long to make the rods, yes. I kept having to take uranium from the drawer to make them. After it finished firing in day 223, I immediately made another schematic and requested an autocraft for those rods. While that was going, I designed a new contraption for my Phytos, a way to make diamonds easier. I used 4 Phytos, all outputting using pipes to a single tier 3 crafter. Water on top, Phytos underneath, drawers underneath that, and power in the middle using end gates to wirelessly transfer power. On my to-do list, I added an objective to redo my Phyto factory in this way, as it would allow for more effective seed growth. Would I get to it this episode? Nah. The amount of times I say future burger problem was very high as I was recording this set of 100 days. In day 224, I kept working on both more diamond phyto stations and more reactor layers. I ended with 4 of them on day 225, which would passively produce quite a lot of diamonds as these days went on. Phytogenic insulators are really just insane. I am aware that lily pads of fertility are better, but frankly each one of them requires rare drops from a mob, which I couldn't be bothered to do within Skyblock. Additionally, it's pretty laggy. I like my lag low and my progress high and my cheese drippy, bruh. Maybe a different run. As this day went on, I regretted my decision to make this reactor so big. I was a quarter of the way into this set of 100 days, and finishing the reactor would take so much longer. So I decided to downsize it, making the roof of the reactor match the height of my Inferium platform, which I don't use anymore. With that, it was a lot more reasonable to do, and I could actually reasonably think about things after the reactor. With day 226, I finished the deconstruction of the upper levels of the reactor walls, and just kind of threw them in my storage. With the new reasonable goal in mind, it was a lot of weight off my back to push forward. It didn't take too long to get to the final layout of the reactor, and begin the checkerboard of the roof, swapping between casings and control rods. Casings above the diamond blocks, and control rods above the nuclear rods. It took all the way until day 228 to finish placing every single block. With the last one, it successfully formed. My 30-day mission was complete. The reactor was done, but I definitely didn't have good enough fuel input right now. The 10.3k uranium that I had built up filled the reactor by about 10%. I did turn it on to test how fast it consumed the fuel, and it was consuming at a decent rate. If I wanted it to not explode, I'd need to massively scale up my uranium production. Good news is that when monitoring the reactor, it was making over 1 million Fe per tick, with only 10% filled, which was exactly what I wanted. So I got to work on adding more phytos to upgrade my uranium production. Autocrafting soul-infused FLAs was super slow, so I looked into more upgrades. At the time, I assumed FLAs made machines faster than 110% each, so I crafted a few twin-eye FLAs to put on my pulverizers in day 229, as those were the real bottleneck for the speed of these autocraftings. Took forever to make the soul sand dust from crushing soul sand. For the rest of this day, I worked on making patterns for every integral component up to Abyssal tier. The integral components were where the real speed came from. In day 230, with the patterns encoded for autocrafting, I autocrafted a Dragon Steel integral component, which multiplied the FLA modifier by 5 times. I did skip the tier 3 one as it wasn't too hard to go right to tier 4. Mystical agriculture is fair and balanced. To finish this day, I requested over 200 materials for soul-infused FLAs, then started to tidy up my island a little bit, adding pathways all over the place to connect up to my various facilities. Just for aesthetics really. If you stick in one world for a while, you gotta make it look nice. In day 232, skipping 231 because it's really just uranium phyto work, I started to work on the next tier of integral component, making 2 induction smelters and hooking up pattern providers to them. They were for tiers above Abyssal, so I set it up in preparation. I autocrafted my first Abyssal component, which shook a bit. On day 233, I looked into upgrading every phyto working on making uranium. The 200 plus soul infused I requested a few days prior had finished and just needed to be added to the machines. I also upgraded my drawers with the fuel and waste to have 4 diamond upgrades each, upping the capacity to 679 million. I'd probably never get there, let's be real. I then upgraded my Ender Cell that had been taking in power from the Spirited tier to Nitro tier, so it could transfer power a lot faster. I autocrafted more Nitro batteries to up its capacity to 42 billion. With more phytos upgraded, I turned the reactor on to see how it was doing. 75 phytos, majority with tier 2 integral components and soul-infused FLAs. Upon monitoring it, it was just barely negative in output, dropping 0.1 every 15 seconds or so. Even not full, it was making a whopping 12.1 million Fe per tick. Honestly, it was entirely overkill for where I was at, but that's exactly what I like to do, go overkill. If it isn't overkill, I don't want it. In day 234, I did a bit of bee work, adding trees and hives to their new home. That's really all I did for productive bees in this whole 100 days, as I hadn't really yet learned how the mod pack works in this 100 days. After recording this set of 100 days, I did start another ATM run of the base pack where I learned how the bead mod worked. That video series will be out shortly after this one. I decided then to make more backups to my power, making more nitro batteries to up my undercell capacity to now 62 billion, and even adding 4 elite energy cubes from Mechanism as backup. That is the only Mechanism thing I do this entire 100 days, so I haven't quite wrapped my head around it yet. Anyways, to help my uranium production out, I decided to add bone meal autocrafters to the area using the same setup I did with the diamond one from earlier. Skeleton seeds can make essence that could be crafted into bones, so I set up to where 4 phytos went into one crafter to make bones, then all went into another crafter that was responsible for turning those bones into bone meal. I did have to swap around my pipes to accommodate for the addition of the bone meal, but when it was all said and done, in day 237, I upgraded the uranium drawer to netherite drawer upgrades, putting the capacity up to 2.1 billion. Yeah, I'm never going to reach that, or give you up, or let you down except with my 213 building promise in the Create series. Anyways, to help with the huge amount of seeds being produced as a byproduct of making uranium essence, I added a new 1x2 drawer above the crafter, with a pipe set to only allow the essence through. The drawer got 4 diamond upgrades and a void upgrade, so it could hold a lot of seeds. Now the seeds weren't a problem anymore, which was nice. They had almost filled the crafter in the time spent on other things. With the seed problem fixed, in day 238 I upgraded my AE2 wireless boosters, extending the range out to cover my entire island. I then took the whole day to make the exterior of my phyto factory for uranium, keeping with the theme of using acacia logs. I personally hate acacia, but my friends challenged me to make acacia look good to where I was satisfied with it, so I took a lot of time to build. When day 239 came, the storage for my reactor was 100% full, so I turned it on to test my output. The reactor was generating 17.4 million FP per tick, which was absolutely overkill. When monitoring, my uranium production was just slightly below to where I could just turn it on and leave it be. It was just barely negative, going up and down 0.1 points and then settling on that 0.1 down after a bit. Not overkill enough. And day 240 I did just that, adding 42 more phytos to the uranium factory. There was now over 100 just in this little area. It took a whole day to add them and upgrade them, so in day 241 I finished, then started to look into some other issues currently present on my island, like my source jars. They had been sitting at 100% full for a while, so I made an enchanting apparatus from Ars Nouveau and used it to make a source storage cell, which I combined with a 256k storage component. It would hold a metric ton of source, more than I would ever need. I hooked it up to importers to the jars, and it started filling into my ME network. I still needed to deal with the barrels hooked up to my mob farm, that was a future burger problem. The only thing of note in day 242 is that I encoded the patterns to autograph melodic integral components, which use the induction smelters to make new bars, melodic bars. My first autograph for a melodic tier integral component finished in day 243. Melodic integral components had 8.5 times modifier as opposed to the 6 times that Abyssal had. The only issue was that tier 4 and above integral components required crushing a lot of dragon heads. I could craft them for mystical agriculture, but when adding an Abyssal and 3 soul infused upgrades to my phyto in my big factory, it took longer for the seed to come back to the phyto than the seed took to grow. So I simply moved the seed next to my diamond ones so it could go faster. I had the same layout as the diamond ones except no crafter underneath. I would have more fighters here later on, like a netherite seed one that I added as the day ended. Why yes, I did forget channel limits exist as well. In day 244 I encoded a pattern for the final integral component, the stellarite integral component. This one was a huge 12 times modifier, which made it almost instant to grow. Big fan of that. It took over a minute to autocraft, but I placed it in my first uranium phyto and watched it go. I needed a few more to really set my reactor to where I could just leave it unattended, but first was some other tasks. I deconstructed my wither box that I made in the first 100 days, as I now had nether star seeds and didn't need this box anymore. I also made a second dragon seed phyto next to the other one just in case. In day 245 I deconstructed the end portal room, my ongoing goal to make this island of mine more presentable. I was autocrafting stellarite integral components while doing this, so I was just keeping myself busy. I hooked up a mob farm to my ME finally, then looked into a wireless transfer. As it turns out, there is wireless item transfer in Applied Energy 6.2. It's just not in the freaking quest. In day 246, I made a wireless ME setup kit and started to make a lot of stuff wireless, using the die thing to ensure that nothing messed up or interfered with each other. Now my mob farm was fully hooked up to my ME network, good and bad as my storage was filling up really quickly. Future burger problem. I have an idea for the next 100 days of a way to fix that. Too much essence, not enough tier 3 crafters. With day 247, I finally had enough stellarite integral components in my Fido to where my uranium production was comfortably high enough to where my reactor would always be positive and I could fully leave it be. Huge weight off my back, but I would still increase my uranium production just in case over the next 100 days. I then just built for the rest of the day, as I wanted a room to my Benelith dedicated to a single thing, the portable black hole. In my opinion, this was the easiest star component to obtain by far, so throughout days 248 and 249, I worked on a simple autocraft for it. Essentially how it worked is that I had a cobblestone generator or a Fido with a seed for each respective material type. Sand and gravel were processed by a hammer to be made into the materials. I then hooked up a barrel with a compacting upgrade and set the output pipe to only allow the compacted material into the crafter. Over time it would passively make the materials to make the portable black hole. I just had to let it sit, which I was okay with. I did need 18 of these portable black holes to truly complete the mod pack, so eventually I need to speed it up. Future burger problem, like so many other things. Take a shot every time I see a future burger problem. I slept into day 250, now halfway through this set of 100 days. In this day, I just built. I wanted a small break from a lot of the grind, and building's what I felt like doing. It's nice to take a break and smell the roses. Speaking of roses, I slept into day 251 with a new goal, Botania. This part of the video will go through the days pretty quick since I had zero idea of what I was doing through most of this, which extended the time I took on it. I started with a petal apothecary, which let me craft different flowers by tossing them in. To get the flowers needed for this mod, I crafted a floral fertilizer, which was bone meal but made only Botania flowers. I spammed the hell out of it to get a good amount. To start the mana train, I used the petal apothecary to toss flower petals in, crafting a hydrangeas. How do you pronounce that? This flower generated mana by eating water sources. It was awful. It was terrible. It was one of the worst flowers in this mod. I also made an endoflame, which ate burnable materials to make mana. Also pretty bad, but not as bad. To get important materials for the mod, I made a pure daisy, which converted logs and stone around it into living wood and living rock respectively. They were used to craft a variety of things within this mod. This mod is all about conversion, converting logs to living wood, converting diamonds to make mana diamonds, converting my happiness to depression, and so on. I crafted a mana pool using the living rock, then a mana spreader out of living wood and copper. The mana spreader was what was used to pull mana from the flower and shoot it into the mana pool. It was super slow on the flowers that I had currently. I really should have gone for the flower that eats nether stars immediately, as I had infinite stars right now, but I didn't know it existed at first, but I do make it later. In day 253, skipping 252 as nothing happened of importance, all I did was set up more hydrangeas and make a runic altar, which let me craft runes using the recipes for many flowers and rune rituals. Tech mod disguised as a pretty flower mod. In day 254, I needed to increase my mana output, so I opened a ton of spoils bags from Force Crafts to try and get a PSA grade 10 Alpha Black Lotus. These spoils bags draw from my mob farm, so I had a ton of them. I did get a few lotuses, but they were only jewel lotuses. Card game joke. I'm funny sometimes. These black lotuses could be tossed in mana pools to just give it a bunch of mana. So I used that mana to convert iron into mana steel, and made mana steel seeds so I could stock up on the essence for when I needed mana steel eventually. I gave it its own Fido next to the others outside and continued on, making a mana tablet so I could move mana from pool to pool. I then began on making Terra Steel, stocking up a lot of mana in day 255, so I worked on some runes in order to make the Terra Steel agglomeration plate. It was used to make actually a few things, like bees, but more importantly it made Terra Steel by tossing on a mana steel, mana diamond, and a mana pearl, made from converting iron, converted diamonds, and converted ender pearls in that order. It would take a while as my mana production was still doo-doo. Then day 256 I made a Narslimus, which ate slimes that... Wait, what do you mean it doesn't work on slimes with spawners? Never mind. In day 257, I made the Entrepinium, which ate exploding TNT. Not joking, I could light TNT next to it, and as long as it had no mana inside it, it could eat the TNT right before it exploded and generated a very large amount of mana. I could see the mana stored in it using a Wand of the Forest, which I crafted earlier and just forgot to jot down. I did need a steady source of mana though, so I made a ton of Endo Flames and spent all the way through day 260 managing mana by tossing coal blocks into the Endo Flames. Another instance of hindsight 2020 should have made the Witherstar Munchers immediately. You'll see how good they are when I make them way later. The reason I mentioned day 260 here instead of just skipping it is because I made my very first Terra Steel in this day, tossing the materials and watching the particles fly. To send mana to the plate, I had crafted Sparks, which wirelessly moved mana from pools with sparks over them to places where the mana could be used, like the Terra Steel plate and the Mana Infuser later on. After acquiring my first Terra Steel, I went right into making a second, as the recipe on JEI shows a full mana pool needed, but it only took half when I filled up the mana pool entirely. All the way to day 262, as I spent day 261 making a third and fourth Terra Steel. I started to work on a new flower, the Munch Dew. It 8 leaves in world to make mana. If you missed it, I made a short on these flowers. They're very good. At the end of the day, I made Terra Steel seeds and gave them their own dedicated phyto right next to the Mana Steel one. These would passively make Terra Steel essence over time, which I could craft into the ingots. In day 263, I crafted a handful of Munch Dews, which took the entire day since I was still using Endo Flames to generate the mana to make the runes. It was super slow, but the Munch Dews would speed up my production of mana. In day 265, skipping 264 since it was just small things, I worked on a create contraption to harvest the trees grown from saplings. This was so I can get mana from the Munch Dews eating the tree leaves, and then the create contraption could cut the tree down and send it into my ME network. I finished the contraption in day 266 and set it going. Initially I had lapis around the mechanical bearing for the contraption, but I swapped it to dirt in day 267 so that way more trees could grow. I had a bunch of Munch Dews and a good amount of spreaders to put it into pools around it. I should have used a splitter, but it didn't cross my mind at the time. While the mana was building up, as I needed it for the next step of Botania, I resumed my work on occultism in day 268, expanding the third floor of my Benelith to accommodate the rituals. I just started to complete the quests for a potential 100% run, so I made a ritual of Abras's Open Conjure. I placed the runes in chalk, then placed the materials, then sacrificed a cow to start it up. Sorry, Bessie. After a bit, it summoned in a Freet, which I one-shot. It dropped a Freet Essence, which went into Impure Red Chalk. I didn't need the Impure Red Chalk right now, but I would later. I took some Isium, which was made through my Blackstone autosieve I set up last episode, and made a pickaxe with it. It was a quest, so I did it. I just made the pickaxe as I would need it to get the demon mining shaft, but I didn't need a demon mining shaft right now because I already had pretty much infinite resources. Afterwards, in day 269, I used the Strieger's Higher Binding Ritual and a bunch of various materials to create an empty soul gem, which was a component needed in the All the Mods star. I took time to make all 18, finishing in day 270. I could have used my time in a bottle, but frankly I forgot. I should take a tally of things I look at, say I'm gonna do, then forget to do. It's pretty high at this point. I then looked into resuming Blood Magic, as it was a mod I felt I could complete alongside Botania and Occultism before the 100 days was out. I tried and failed to hook up a pattern provider to the Blood Altar. I wanted to autograph the slates I needed, but I'm not the smartest person when it comes to automation, so I unfortunately failed to do so. Comment section, do your work. In day 271, I made 5 capacity runes and added them to my altar. Essentially, these runes were blocks that you can place around your altar that change different things about your altar. These ones increase the capacity of life essence it could hold from 8,000 to 22,000. Pretty nice upgrade for when I started stabbing myself to give it life essence. In day 272, it saw me using a gold block on the altar to create a Magician's Blood Orb, which was needed to make higher tier crafts within the mod. I used it to make the alchemical reaction chamber, which I could use to make various recipes, mostly ones that deconstructed things. I then crafted a ritual core and a bunch of ritual blocks so I could gain access to one of the dimensions present within this mod. There's 2 of them of note, the Hidden Realm and the Endless Realm. I made a ritual diviner, then made an activation crystal. On day 273, I tried to activate the ritual, but it said I was too weak. I put all the blocks in the right place and had everything set up, but as it turns out, I needed life essence in my blood orb to activate it. There was nothing telling me that's the case, and no way to know how much I need or how much I have stored. It's a bit of a nitpick I have with some of the All the Mods quests sometimes, where it just doesn't tell you helpful information like that or give some good examples. I took a bit of time to stab myself to fill my orb, then I felt I had enough, I activated it again, and the structure constructed, making a pylon into the hidden realm. This dimension was pretty small, only consisting of 5 rooms total, a main room and 4 branches. A chest in the main room had iron keys inside, which could open the doors. I needed a single thing from this dimension, just Tau fruit. Fortunately, there was some in a chest on one of the rooms. In day 274, I returned home and planted the Tau. To get to the next dimension, I needed to feed the growing fruit some blood from a mob. I grabbed a second sheep and placed it on the Tau, twerking to make it grow. After a third sheep, I harvested the saturated Tau, needing it to make blood shards with alchemical reaction chamber. I did need to use a tartaric gem to make the sanguine reverter needed to get the blood shards, but my old one went missing. I made a new one though and upgraded it to lesser tier by using some stored will that I had found. Will was annoying to get using the soul snares, so I went with a better route, the sentient sword. I could heal hostile mobs and it would suck the will out of them, storing it in any tartaric gem that was on me. To get a large amount of will, I used a gateway from the Gateways to Eternities mod. These gateways summoned a lot of mobs based on what gateway you use, so I used a gateway to the Emerald Grove, but that ended up being awful, only getting me some will. It was not very good, but it was enough to make a common tartaric gem in day 275. But I needed more, so I experimented with other gateways, trying a slime gateway, which was okay, and then a gateway to the Hellish Fortress. The Hellish Fortress got me a lot more will, and even rewarded loot that could be found in nether chests, so that was the one I'd go with. I made the sanguine reverter after farming for a bit, then used saturated Tau to make blood shards, using it and stone to make bloodstone. It was needed for a tier 4 altar as capstones for some pillars, which I got right to work on, crafting a ton of blink runes, speed runes, and capacity runes. I finished this altar on day 276, and it was getting a little big for this room. I was currently on tier 4, but the tier 5 one would have to be outside. I spent the rest of the day making slates in preparation for the next push. In day 277, I used a blood shard on my altar to make a master blood orb, which stored a lot more life essence. With the tier 4 altar completed, I made the next slate, the demonic slate. It took a bit. I upgraded my ritual diviner to tier 2, then set it to the next ritual, the pathway to the endless realm. I needed 72 ritual stones to make this one, so I got to work finishing it in day 278. I made sure to store up a bunch of life essence, then activated the ritual, making a new pylon which led to the endless realm. I entered and began my exploration. Like the hidden realm, it started with a main room, but this one had endless corridors that led deeper and deeper. It's a really cool concept as a lot of the rooms were randomized and were generated as you use the keys. Just don't run out of keys or break the lock, which I totally did not do on an important place. You could make more, but also find more iron keys scattered in chests about. But throughout days 279 to 282, I explored the Endless Realm, finding tons of loot, breaking a bunch of spawners, and discovering secrets. I did find a mine door in day 279, which led into the mines. I needed a different key for that though. These mines were essential to the progression of this mod and reaching the endgame, as chests within could contain Hellforge parts, needed to make the final tier of runes. I also needed Demonite ore, which was found in these runes at random. As I was exploring, I opened a room and received a message that I sensed a spatial disturbance. In this room, on the other end, a chest surrounded by Demonite, with a foreman's key inside. This key opened the mines, so I delved inside, ending with 3 total Hellforge parts. These mines had netherite gear inside, but were also filled with a lot of tough enemies, not really for low power players, but I had unobtainium armor, so I was good. In day 282, after returning home, I went and gathered more will by farming some gateways. I used it to make the greater tartaric gem, which could hold a lot more. I then started work on the tier 5 altar, which required another full stack of blank runes. I was out of space, so I extended out a platform from the 3rd floor of my benevolith to fit it in. It was big, but I used the guidebook to visualize a model of it to build, finishing it by the end of the day. With 283, I placed a blank slate on the altar and waited, making ethereal slates, the final tier slate. I needed a good amount to make the runes I'd use for this altar, but the first 3 runes I made using the Hellforge parts were reinforced runes of augmented capacity. These increased the capacity of the blood altar multiplicatively based on the amount of capacity runes already on it. This increased my total from 42,000 up to 62,000 life essence I could store, which was very nice. At this point in day 284, I was ready to resume Botania, so I started on Terra Steel armor. I absolutely had enough with how much Terra Steel essence I was creating. I did need a bunch of runes and Mana Steel armor to make, so in day 285, I finished this armor. There is a set bonus, but frankly I have unobtainium armor, so I don't really think I need any armor until mech armor. I would use it as a cosmetic, but there's a certain armor set I'd rather have a cosmetic armor instead of Terra Steel. Alf Steel armor. With Terra Steel armor, I went to making the portal to Alfheim. I needed 2 nature pylons made from Terra Steel nuggets. In making the portal, you needed 2 almost full mana pools, which I did have at this point. Make the portal out of the materials in the nest, then click on the core with your wand to open it up. It worked perfectly, portal opening after a short time. The first thing I did was toss in my Botania guidebook, as this unlocks more chapters within. Like Iron to Mana Steel, I could toss Mana Steel into the portal to get Elementium. I went right to make the seeds for it, of course. My entire resource economy is seeds, why would I not make seeds? It went right next to my Terra Steel and Mana Steel seed Phytos. I then tossed Living Wood into the portal to receive Dreamwood. I used that good stuff to craft Elven Mana Spreaders, which had no mana loss. Mana loss is mana being lost as it shot from a spreader. It happened over distance. These ones did not have it though. In day 286, I crafted the Elementium armor and an Elementium sword. The sword specifically so I can get a special item, the Alf Steel template. It required me killing witches or evokers with an Elementium sword to drop. They had a chance to drop it on kill. I was kinda lost on how I'd get a witch without waiting forever at my mob farm, but then I had an idea. For roughly 10 days now, 2 pillagers, one a captain, had been standing high up on my bee house. They were just watching me, so it was easy enough to kill the captain and start a raid. In day 287, I had finished the raid, but unfortunately no template dropped. But it was not all over, there's solutions to everything. I was able to craft charms from witch drops, which could then be crafted into a spawn egg. I went to my possessed Hoglin spawner, which I hadn't thought about in over 100 days, and converted it into a witch spawner with the egg. I made it redstone activated, then sat and killed witches as they spawned. After sitting there for a while, I got 1 to drop, and a handful more were slept up by the hopper thing I had. In day 288, I ended with 7, which was plenty enough. I started to work on Elf Steel, but I needed more mana, so I made more pools and mana splitters, which split mana received into mana pools around it. Should have made one earlier. At the end of 289, after making a ton of runes and a new platform made of shimmerrock and gold blocks, I made the Mana Infuser, which was used to make Elf Steel. By the way, another nitpick, Elf Steel is not in the questline for Britannia, even though it really should be, especially with how important it is. Come on. In day 290, with only 10 days left, I was starting to feel the rush. I needed Elf Steel. I didn't want to leave Britannia on a cliffhanger like this. I needed a big mana generator, one that could make enough mana to where I'd be able to make it what I needed. So I did some research by reading the Mythic Botany section of the guidebook and found the Wither Aconite, which ate nether stars to generate so much mana. So I set up 7 total mana pools with 2 splitters, 1 pool being shared between the splitters. I needed wither roses to make the aconites, so I made a market and traded emeralds for wither roses. In day 291, this was the day where my mana production exploded in volume. I successfully made a wither aconite and tossed it a nether star. Immediately it began its work munching away at the nether star to make mana. When it munched, the star lost durability. Either the aconite ate the star fully or the star despawned, so it's 5 minutes of rapid continuous mana. In just 1 star, it made more mana than my munch do setup could in days of work. It was just that good. So I made a few more aconites, up to 4 total, and had 2 per splitter. To prepare for entering into Alfheim, I made rune holders, which were used for rune rituals later on. In day 292, I needed to learn how to do rune rituals, so I made a branch of Yggdrasil and a horn of the wild. I threw the horn into a mana pool to make a Gallowhorn. No, not the rocket launcher. I set the Gallahorn on the branch and filtered mana into it using an Aconite. After a short time, it produced the water from the Well of Mimir. It was a potion that I could drink to gain knowledge into performing rune rituals using runes and a rune tablet of I had my sights set on the blood of Kvasir, which could be made into a mead that would let me enter into the portal that I made earlier and explore Alfheim. At this point, the Wither Aconites had made enough mana to fill 5 out of the 7 mana pools, more than enough to make Elfsteel. I made a Dominant Spark Augment, set it on the spark over the Mana Diffuser, then tossed the materials onto the plate. An Elementium Ingot, which was Mana Steel tossed into the portal, a Dragonstone, which was a Mana Diamond tossed into the portal, and Pixie Dust, which was a Mana Pearl tossed into the portal. All on the plate, I made my very first Elfsteel Ingot, needed to finish Botania. I made 3 Elfsteel to start, then crafted 4 Elfsteel Pylons using Nature Pylons and Elfsteel Nuggets. In day 293, I turned those Elfsteel Pylons into Gaia Pylons, used in the Ritual of Gaia. To summon Gaia, you need to put pylons around an active beacon of any tier. It's better to do the base beacon tier, because the fight negates the beacon effect as it goes. I built the beacon out of netherite blocks to flex, then used a Terra Steel Ingot on the beacon to summon and fight Gaia. I'll roll the fight uncut. Enjoy. With Gaia down, it dropped Gaia Spirit, the endgame crafting material for Britannia. I went immediately to make Gaia Spirit seeds, which both made the essence to craft Gaia Spirits and were also used in one of the components for the Aldermont Star for this pack. The seeds aren't actually in the base pack, they don't even exist in base Aldermont 9. I'd need 18 more seeds, but that's a future burger problem. With the Gaia Spirit, I made a Cloak of Balance, which shared damage between myself and the enemy that damaged me. There's quite a large number of accessories made from these Gaia Spirits, but most of which are for a future burger to make. With day 294, it was time to fight Gaia again, but this time a much stronger variant. I used Gaia Spirit and a Terra Steel Ingot to make a Gaia Ingot, then activated the ritual again to fight Gaia 2.0. Not gonna showcase this fight as it's pretty much identical, just a bit longer. When defeated, this Gaia dropped a hell of a lot of runes, and a Dice of Fate, and a rune tablet of Fibblethip. This dice was unique to the player and dropped a powerful artifact each time on a knockout system. I farmed Gaia into day 295, where I acquired all of them. I won't show all of these artifacts as I'll leave it a surprise for you all, but some of them are very, very strong. I farmed more runes and finally used Elfsteel and templates to upgrade my Terra Steel armor into Elfsteel armor. The strongest armor in Botania was now mine to wear as a cosmetic. This armor did have mana mending, but I had Unobtainium, which I am pretty sure is better. Comments please input. With Botania just about complete, I decided to take some time to building out my island on day 296, going out to the closest chunk border with dirt. My dirt essence had been building up for this entire 100 days, so I had plenty. The Affinity Wand made this a total joke to build. It was great. The building continued into day 297, where I replaced the path I had made earlier with living rock slabs. I had a white and gray color palette with my island and I intended to keep that, and do it more later on. Day 298. 2 days left. So close. I started to work on the Blood of Kvasir ritual, making all the runes. This took a bit, as some of the runes were brand new to me. I wasn't sure how the ritual actually started, so I accidentally killed a wandering trader that I had mob yoinked some 100 days prior. I had assumed that this ritual was similar to occultism, where I killed a mob to start the ritual, but that wasn't the case. But this wasn't all over, as I had a wandering trader spawn egg from my many murders of it. I replaced the spawn egg in my witch spawner with it, then in day 299 I yoinked another one and completed the ritual, using mana in my mana tablet and my wand of the forest to activate the ritual, sacrificing a wandering trader and a few materials that I tossed down on the ground to produce the Blood of Kvasir. Fortunately, it only consumed the rune tablet of Fibblethip and not the actual runes. I combined the blood with a honey bottle to make the Mead of Kvasir. Drinking it unlocked the ability to actually travel into the Alfheim portal I made many days ago and enter into Alfheim itself. It was a very beautiful dimension filled with petal apothecary and a lot of passive mobs, until nighttime. Unfortunately, I couldn't spend super long here, as it was day 299 and approaching nighttime. So I returned home and started to set up the Ritual of Mjolnir. I wouldn't be able to do it in this time, but in the next 100 days I would make the Hammer of Legend using the Rune Ritual. Instead of doing the ritual, I simply built for the rest of the night. A relaxing end to this set of 100 days, and as the sun rose over Big Bertha, day 300 arrived, and with that, the set of 100 days has come to an end. Let's review what happened. Of my goals at the start of this video, I did actually complete most of them. My first goal was making a gargantuan amount of power that I absolutely completed with flying colors, beating my goal of 10 million, instead making a whopping 17.4 million, despite the loading issue it had. I'll have to fix that. My second goal of finishing blood magic was also completed, mostly. I did obtain the materials to finish the mod, but not enough for the star, nor enough to max out my altar, so kind of complete. My third goal of taking my ME system wireless was also a resounding success, and most of production within my island is all wireless now, save my uranium for the reactor. The fourth and final goal of entering Alfheim and obtaining Mjolnir was the only failure on this list, unfortunately. While I did enter Alfheim for a short time at the very end, I did not craft Mjolnir quite yet. I definitely could in the next 100 days, but I'll have to wait until next time. Speaking of next time, I hope you stay tuned for the next one. Thank you all for coming and watching. See you all in the next one. Bedrock Burger, out.